So, Ahmed, where am I?
You're at Cardiff Metropolitan University. My name's Dan Anthony, and I teach creative writing here at Cardiff Met, and also I work with the Centre for Entrepreneurship. I'm a lecturer in entrepreneurship education, a post that I've only recently taken up.
Okay, so it's even just the last couple of months or something. So
Yeah.
recent.
I mean, my background is I've always worked in the creative industries, really, for far too many years to be precise about. I've worked as a scriptwriter for the BBC and quite a lot of broadcasting companies in the UK. I work now as a children's author. I've also, in the beginning of my career, my first kind of love was really radio. I spent a long time writing scripts for radio and for comedy.
Why radio? What's good about radio?
Because I think that if you're a writer, I think, or any creative really, you need to explore the thing that gives you the most pleasure, the thing that that really kind of inspires you. And basically, I think I'm quite an aural person. I always notice that I remember little lines that people say. And I remember myself from growing up and enjoying kind of, plays and television and so forth, that I was one of the few kids who liked the radio.
Okay.
Not many 9-year-olds do, but some do. So I grew up listening to repeats of The Goon Show, Morecambe and Wise, people like that on the radio. I loved the sound of all of this stuff. And I think that idea of, if you like, the visual landscape that a sound environment gives you is really exciting. And perhaps the book, or the radio program that became a book that inspired me really to think, actually, this is so interesting, you should really try to do it, was, like a lot of people, Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Okay.
So I can just remember at the age, a lot of people say, I heard the first series. I know I heard the first series. And I know I went into school and told everybody, my English teacher and so forth, about it. And I know that they didn't believe me because I was this geeky kid listening to the radio.
And that was a classic that worked better on radio than when they did try to take it to television, because the pictures were so much better on the radio.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it worked okay. It was a great book as well. But that's similar in a sense, that both of those media allow the recipient or the audience or the reader complete freedom to kind of start to regenerate the ideas that the writer creates. And that, I think, was the reason why I began to enjoy radio. And also, I think, something that might be relevant, I was a terrible speller. Couldn't spell for toffee, had terrible handwriting, and was kind of identified as somebody who really wasn't very good at, if you like, English and writing, things like that.
Do you think if you went to school now, you might have a dyslexia tab of some form?
You never know, do you? I mean, the thing, I've never thought about sort of inquiring into that, because in a weird way now, at the age of 55, I just don't want to know. It's too late anyway. Well, I'm sure people will sort of ring you and say, no, it isn't. If we do this to you now, you'll be fine. Yeah. But in a sense, I think that I've enjoyed the experience that I had. And it's very easy for all of us, and certainly those of us in the creative industry who are always making up new ideas. Not everything works, so the spelling didn't work very well. But other things maybe did. The listening, the sound part did.
And so storytelling and entrepreneurship, how do they two?
I think they're very closely related, and I think that in a sense. I think this relationship is one that's being explored more in recent times. But I think, for example, if one considers, inverted commas, the greats of literature, or the greats of the English canon, or any canon of literature, you'll find people like Charles Dickens were, in fact, publishers. That Charles Dickens spent a great deal of time arguing about his rights, even before they were kind of codified in a modern sense by the legal system. You'll find that a great modernist writer, someone like Virginia Woolf, begins by creating her own publishing house. You'll find this relationship between in this case, literary creativity and kind of thinking about the market. That's really all I'm driving at in this idea of entrepreneurship here, is really, really close. And if you go right back to the beginnings, people like Defoe and Swift and Cervantes, even earlier than that, you'll find this tripartite relationship between writer, reader, and intermediary market is there. It's a really interesting area.
And is it that at their level, the need for them to sell their work, or that it also impacts their work itself?
Both. I think it always is the case, and I'm sure again there are many people who might disagree with that comment. But I think that as a practicing creative writer now, that it is a two-way relationship. Just as we understand that the relationship between writer or artist and or writer in the case of books and reader is a dialogue. Similarly, the structures that we have in position in the market now also they're not kind of passive, they're active. So perhaps the easiest way to understand this is to take an idea like a brand or even a trademark or something like that. And the first question that interested me was actually thinking back to sort of school days, thinking, when I was about 14, everybody, all of us, used to have a kind of, there were so many garage bands around, and we used to spend hours not playing music, trying to decide what the name of the band should be. And in a sense, that represents, I think, how important a brand, a trademark, and image is to a kind of creative process. Now, it is active. It's a form of kind of, how can I put, sort of riddling out things or kind of putting things through a colander. So all these people are sort of talking about what name they should have. And in the end, they're coming to some sort of musical agreement about actually what kind of music they're going to play and also what kind of ideas they represent. If you think of a solitary writer or even a writer working as part of a team, it becomes, once you get that, quite easy to see how that process affects the creative process in other areas.
Now you're in academia, there's kind of two areas. One is the passing that mindset and skills on to the students as they're coming through it. But within this space, there's a lot of people writing. You've got scientists in labs creating papers, grant applications, books. You're in the business zone here. They're going to be putting bids in. Where does sort of story and narrative fit into those spaces?
Well, I think that they're all. I think psychologically, I think you can almost sort of step right the way back of this and recognise the fact there is a whole kind of science, if you like, of story, of trying to understand how story works, trying to understand how humans relate to story, trying to find out when did people first start telling each other stories. It turns out that possibly if you kind of go right back and start to look at kind of cave paintings and ideas like this and handprints from tens of thousands of years ago, that probably we've been telling stories as long as we can think, that it's something to do with the way that we operate as human beings. So right down at a fundamental level, all of these activities that are connected with communication are connected with story. And I think that whilst my little area of experience is in the relation of the creation of narratives, if you like, for entertainment, you can see similar traits, similar patterns, and so forth, manifesting themselves in quite, if you like, dry and serious documents. So one of the I find quite interesting things about the work that I do is that oddly, I'm asked on a regular basis to write reports and papers and so forth that have no entertainment value whatsoever on face value, because I'm able to structure a story. And I think that for me, it's the key element that you're driving about with business proposals and more technical documents and so forth is that one of the skills a story writer has to master is the idea of structure. And one of the key aspects of disseminating any form of complicated information is structure. Right. It absolutely all stands and falls in terms of the way that a thing is structured. And so I think, you're right. There are huge synergies in what we do, and I do at a very fundamental level slightly wonder whether we're all actually engaged in the same task, telling stories. But I think that argument is quite a tough argument to maintain. But I think there is a strong relationship anyway.
And certainly within Think Right, we're very keen that people, when they pick up a document before they start writing it, work out what is the structure that's anticipated, whether it's a science paper or a legal paper or a book. A book's got chapters. That's the first part of structure, and it should flow. The narrative should flow at chapter level. Then within the chapters, you've got a substructure and headings. And you can actually map out those and then start filling the vehicle up, rather than just typing away and hoping a structure will evolve from it.
Yeah, I think teaching creative writing, one of the things that we regularly work with, fundamental, I think, to the process of teaching creative writing is for writers to become aware of the fact that there is a process, that whilst we may not all agree on what the process is, and that every individual may well have a slightly different approach to the process, that an individual needs to recognize their creative process in relation to a one-off production, whatever it may be, and maybe to be able to sort of extend that to a variety. Maybe that's a trait that I personally have. But also to see the idea of process as something that is active, that doesn't necessarily just kind of happen because an idea fell onto the page, and that possibly there is a kind of certainly true for me in terms of the generation of stories. There are periods of very important periods in the early stages of a process where one simply doesn't understand what the question is necessarily, not even what we haven't got to the answer yet. And that gradually the process through writing, re-editing, discovering, rejecting, trying things out, different formats, different media, not worrying about the fact that it isn't working, and then starting to wonder about, what does working actually mean? And driving, always trying to drive the thing forward, which is the thing I think that is very difficult to do. So that in the end, if you imagine this like a kind of funnel, often I think what one can end up with, and we were talking about this over a coffee earlier on, is what one can end up with is a little one-line, one-sentence elevator pitch that defines the entire thing. That then, in a sense, in retrospect, makes the editing easy. But to get there is difficult.
Okay. And that's interesting. So process itself is not an inhibitor of creativity.
No. I think it's exactly, and I think awareness of just this idea of process is very important. And this isn't new stuff. I think all writers are aware of this. But here in the university, in a sense, with students who are coming in who've maybe not thought about these things, these are the kind of skills, if you like, or behaviours perhaps, that we want to encourage.
And how do you think this as a process, thinking particularly about your students, enables them to move forwards into a workplace beyond the course they're doing?
I think that's a really good question. And I think when I do open days here, when students come and say, and they're looking to go to different universities, I think it's often the parents who are extremely concerned with this idea, like what's going to happen when they leave here, and also what is the justification for spending £9,000 a year or whatever it may be on this particular inverted commas
time writing silly stories?
Product. Well, I don't think they are,
Yeah.
and I think that writer. If you go back and think about a character like me who can't spell very well and is being has a belief really that they're not a writer, but there's something in them that makes them think that they are, then we're doing a very useful service to people like that, I think, here. So those are the kind of students that I really do enjoy working with a lot. But in terms of what we can offer a mum and dad, if you like, saying, well, what is my child going to come out to be able to do? I think the key attribute, the transferable skill and attribute that we develop here is an appreciation of the unknown, an ability to deal with emptiness, lack of clarity, because this creative writing process that we all work through begins, as all writers know, with utter uncertainty, insecurity, and a lack of where are we going? And we, I hope, through what we teach or learn during certainly the workshops that I'm involved with, and my colleagues are as well, to do with narrative, are really interested in trying to instill confidence in writers so that they start to appreciate this lack of something as something that is actually a blank canvas or something that can be filled in and turned into something.
And a belief that there will be a destination.
And an understanding and a confidence that they can do this. Yeah. And I think that in the 21st century rapidly changing market and world, none of us really have much of a clue what it's going to be like here on this planet in 5 years, 10 years or 50 years. With good luck, we'll all still be here, but it is the students or the workforce that has the most capacity not to be freaked out by not knowing what's going to happen next, who will be able to rise to the challenge. So I'm not advocating teaching nothing. That is absolutely not what I'm suggesting. What I'm suggesting is that we encourage people to learn a variety of skills that enable them to thrive in their own creative context.
I think that's brilliant. Thank you, and I wish you all the best with it.
Great. Thank you very much, Pete.
Thanks for your time.
Cheers.